everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of Throat Punch Lunch. Now, I know what some of you are already saying because, quite frankly, some of you have already said it. Aren't you promoting violence with that name, sir? How dare you? Yeah, I guess it is kind of a violent name, but you know what? It's an inside joke anyway that came from a long time ago, and it would take probably more time than you even care to spend listening to that explanation. I don't throat punch people. I've acted like it when they've asked me to, but I've never actually throat punched anybody, and I don't plan on doing it in the near future, and I don't recommend that anybody else tries to do it in the near future either. Now, with all that behind us, what I would like to do is introduce my show to you. What's going to make breakfast different from Blender, and what's going to make both of those different from lunch? Well, quite frankly, we're not going to cover the same kinds of stuff that they cover. On top of that, we're going to cover mainly a focus on Ameritrash games. Not necessarily all of the games are going to be Ameritrash, but that's the focus that we're headed for. So we're going to have a lot of different kinds of segments. Some of them might overlap on others, but that's okay because you get two different viewpoints about the same thing. What we're doing with Throat Punch Lunch is simply trying to show yet another aspect of our hobby community. And we're showing a lot of different sides of it. I'm going to have a lot of different contributors on Throat Punch Lunch, and I hope that it will be a place where you can come and see some of the parts of our hobby that you maybe were not aware of, or maybe if you did know about them, you didn't really know much about them, and that's pretty much where we're going through, because I want to simply make a show that's enjoyable for you guys to watch, and I think I've compiled some contributors that will make that so. So enough about me and the show's name and how it might possibly blah blah blah. Let's get to the contributors, shall we?
Hey everybody, it is me, the Undead Viking, Lance Meister, and I am here to be part of the Throat Punch Lunch in this little segment that I am calling Ameritrash Treasures. My goal in this little segment is to talk about Ameritrash or thematic games that are part of my collection and will be a part of my collection for as long as I can see fit. These are the games that are heavily themed with lots of chaos, lots of randomness, lots of player interaction, probably have some intellectual properties assigned to them, and something that, like, I know that when I tear it down off my shelf and present it to the rest of the people in my gaming group, we're all going to have a good time playing it. Now, what is an Ameritrash game? Now, Ameritrash or thematic, I'm not a big fan of the Ameritrash name. I'll be fully upfront, but Ameritrash Treasures just sounds kind of cool. But regardless, for whatever reason, Ameritrash just seems to have stuck. I mean, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that one of the preeminent publishers of Ameritrash games, Fantasy Flight, is stationed within the United States. And also, early Ameritrash games also, seem to... That was the games that we had to play when I was growing up. In the late 70s, early 80s, games that I played, a lot of were like this. This was a big game everybody played. Now, I picked this sucker up because this was the version that I played when I was young, and of course my mom threw it away or whatever. But I managed to find a copy at a thrift store. I picked this up for $2 at a thrift store about a year ago. But I mean, Risk is really cool. And Risk was actually designed and created. The origination of Risk is from France. So it doesn't have to be from America to be an Ameritrash game. But here we go. This is a game of world domination. You're rolling buckets of dice, and you only win by stepping over the dead bodies of your enemies, which is something that doesn't necessarily have to be in Ameritrash games, but is something that is very common. You are competing directly against somebody else. Also, as I said, dice. Dice are a big part of the Ameritrash experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but it mostly is. And wooden cubes, not so much. You're not going to see a lot of wooden cubes. You're not going to see a lot of resource generation and victory point engines in thematic games. Now, as I said, dice may not be in these particular games, like, say, Dune. Classic old school Dune, no dice in this game, still heavily conflicted, still heavily themed. But since I'm talking about heavily themed, games like this from Fantasy Flight Rebellion, this is an instant classic of the Ameritrash world and the thematic world. And obviously people are just going crazy over Rebellion right now. I mean, and plus, it doesn't have to be relatively new either, like that old Dune game. Here's my old Hero Quest game that I've somehow managed to keep intact over the years. I mean, I remember begging my mother to peel this off the shelf at my local department store. I think it was a Target, I'm not sure. Begged her to take this off the shelf and buy this for me, and thankfully she did. And I still have this many, many, many years later. Now, some games, people are conflicted as far as whether or not they are truly Ameritrash. I tend to think that Game of Thrones is, but some people say because of the deterministic combat and because, there really isn't there's no dice, there's no real randomness. It's all player decision making. There isn't. But I think because of the heavy theme in the game, theoretically you could just throw another map together and come up with random names for the different houses and just go at it. Yeah, maybe you can. But because of the fact that when you play this game, you feel like you're part of the Game of Thrones world, and you kind of rewrite that history and have fun in that fantastic setting, I think that this is a fairly good representation. Now, it goes without saying that if you have nuclear explosions in a game, like the classic old game of Supremacy, in which you can bomb your opponents back to the Stone Age, that is definitely part of the thematic experience. So my whole goal with this section that I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to highlight a single game that is near and dear to my heart, like my dear precious Arkham Horror, the game that started me down the path of being in this whole designer board game world, and it made me start wanting to be a reviewer and kind of share my experience and share my thoughts of these games with you, my audience that's out there. So thank you very much for taking the time to kind of watch this intro. I'm really excited to present these games that I've shown you right now, and also other games that in the future that I can show off, maybe even this little puppy that showed up in my door today. That's pretty awesome. Still the shrink on. I'm going to tear this open here in a few moments. But so these are the games that I'm going to be presenting. I'm going to talk about why I think they're amazing, why I think they should be part of your collection, and hopefully somewhere along the line we can have some good discussion and we can talk about this era, this part of our hobby that is near and dear to my heart, and I hope it's near and dear to yours as well. All right, well, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this, and don't forget, you have yourself an awesome day. All right, bye-bye.
Welcome to one of my segments called The Canvas. A couple of weeks ago, I got an email from a guy that lives in Brussels about how him and his family painted miniatures as family activity time. Check this out. It says, "Dear Sam, we had a very fun weekend painting for the very first time all of our miniatures for Imperial Assault. We never intended to do that as we purchased the game or during our first gaming sessions, but after a while and after some inspiring videos, now here's the result that we have received after 2 days of learning and enjoyable family time. Keep up your good work, and may the force be with you." This was from Tobias Bahr and his family, Annika, Thaddeus, and Johannes. They live in Brussels. Now, they're a German family, but they live in Brussels, and they were very accepting of the idea of sending me some pictures and, of course, a little bit extra time. Now, these pictures showcase, keep in mind, the first time this family has ever tried painting anything together, and what I loved about it is that they did it together as a family. It wasn't just the dad off by himself doing this. It wasn't just the kids doing it. It was everybody together. He says that they actually used 10 different basic colors and some gold for C-3PO. And he thinks that the next project that they're going to be doing is Arcadia Quest, which is one of his son's favorite games. Now, I know that there are probably a lot of other stories out there about how painting miniatures has affected your life positively in some way. Maybe it has simply given you a place of solace to go to after a busy day at work, or maybe like Tobias's family here, it has brought brought you together and you and your family together around the table for some quality time. Whatever it might be, I'd love to hear your story, and I'd love to be able to showcase it here on my segment called The Canvas. So if you would, email me at the listed email address below, and I'll get in touch with you, and we'll see what we can do on showcasing your story about how painting miniatures has positively affected your life on a future episode. But hey, let's get to the rest of the contributors.
My name is Marty Connell, and I'm a host on the podcast Rolling Dice and Taking Names, proud member of the Dice Tower Network. As a gamer, I enjoy many genres of this hobby, including board games such as Euros and Ameritrash, miniature games, card games, and role-playing games. When I recall all the board games I've played over the years, the memories that always stick out are the ones involving Ameritrash or thematic type games. It's those games where you are so wrapped up in the game that by the end of the session, everyone might be standing around the table, and at that point, a simple card flip or a dice roll can cause all the players to erupt in a range of emotions. Thematic games are typically games that have more luck than their Euro-style counterparts. These elements can help add tension in a game where sometimes your best laid plans can be thwarted by a bad dice roll or card draw. In addition, thematic games typically have more player interaction. Again, your best laid plans might be thwarted just by somebody taking their turn and messing you up and maybe doing something you didn't expect them to do. Hey, you remember that time we were going to play the Game of Thrones board game? And I was the Lannisters and you were the Greyjoys. And at the beginning of the game, we decided we're going to have this alliance where we helped each other to get to the end of the game. But then halfway through the game, you stabbed me in the back. You remember that? Do you? Do you? Some of the recent games that come to mind when I think of my exciting Ameritrash play sessions are games like Eldritch Horror, Battlestar Galactica, and Dead of Winter. All these games provided memories that I continue to talk about with people even to this day. Whether it's a particular event that happened during the game or the way a player acted, it's experiences that we can share long after the game is back on the shelf. That's why I believe with the right people and the right environment, thematic games are good examples of board games that tell stories. Board games that tell stories. I gotta write that down. That'd be a good title for a book. In future segments, I'm going to share my thoughts on why some Ameritrash games lend themselves to creating such a vibrant and emotional game experience. Plus, I'll look at ways to enhance that experience beyond the game that you're playing on the table. In the meantime, I'd love to hear some of the thematic games that you've played that created memories that you still talk about today. List your games in the comments. You know, a Lannister always pays his debts.
Hey everybody, and thank you Sam for inviting me to a new segment. This segment is called Awesome Sauce. It's going to be strategy with Jason. You've asked for a strategy, and now I'm going to give you strategy on games in this segment. So since we're talking minis, etc., I want to start off with Star Wars Rebellion. It's a game that I know a lot of people have bought recently, and I want to talk about some of the strategies in this game. There's two different sides, and each side is very different. One side is the Imperial side, and one side is the Rebellion side. If you're the Imperial side, you have a few things you need to do. You need to spread quickly across the board. To do that, you need to not play as many people on your cards. You need to hold back the people so you could use them for movement on the board. Because the more properties you control, the more forces you could build. You also need to have some people so you could do things like capture one of the rebels and put them in carbonite, interrogate them, and do things to find more probes. That's what you want to do as the Imperials. You want to kind of spread your forces, hold back a lot of your guys so you could use them in defense against the rebels and use them to move pieces. The rebels, on the other hand, you wanted to use a lot of your pieces, not so much for movement, because you only need to capture a few territories, because you already start with some and you only need a little for your building. You instead want to use a lot of your characters for your cards. You have a lot of powerful cards, cards that will give you more objectives, more ways to destroy some of the Imperial troops. You need to basically hide away. You need to hide away from your base. You need to make sure that the Imperials don't march quick enough to your base. And in order to do that, you need to complete objectives. In order to complete objectives, you need to use a lot of your characters to do a lot of actions, not movement actions, but actual card actions to get objectives, to complete objectives, because as you do, you shorten the game. So as the rebels, I would highly say that you need to do objectives, work on those objectives. It's going to be the most important part of the rebels. Anyway, Star Wars Rebellion, either side is great, Both sides are fun to play, and it's a game I think you will highly enjoy, and hopefully this little strategy session gave you an idea of what to do in your first game of Star Wars Rebellion.
Hey guys, this is Roy Caney, and this is Roll with the Punches, where we talk about randomness in games and how it can make a game exciting, and how to twist the odds into your favor. This is the first episode of Throat Punch Lunch, and I figured I would talk about one of my all-time favorite games and randomness in it, and that game is War of the Ring. In War of the Ring, each player is going to have a handful of event cards, and normally you can trigger these event cards, the top part, by using your action dice. You can either use the symbol that is on the event card to trigger the top part of the event, or use a Palantir to trigger any type. But basically, each card has two different parts. It has a top part, which is played by using action dice, or a bottom part, which can be saved by using in combat. So you have to decide, do I want to use the top part, or do I want to use the bottom part and save it for combat? The interesting thing about the game is normally the cards that are way better as far as events go are way better in combat as well. So you have to decide which part of that action do you want to do. Do you want the ints to attack or thank if Gandalf is in Fangorn, or do you want a Gon or a Rohan unit to get +2 dice in their combat? Both of those abilities are really good, and you have to decide which of those two things. The events add a lot of different luck in the game depending on how they come out of the deck, and they make the game shape it in completely different ways depending on how the cards come out and which cards you use when, and when you're going to save the different combat cards for. The way combat works is you're going to be moving. If your unit is at war, you can attack another place. Like say the Uruk-hai with Saruman are going and taking the forwards of Eisen here, trying to take out these Rohan units. They'd be rolling dice and trying to get 5s or 6s on the dice to hit. But at the beginning of each round of combat, you're going to be using one of these cards to help mitigate that. So there's different ones that can add 1 dice to the combat roll for my Rohan units on their side, or ones that are really good and make it so that they have -1 from all of their dice for the remainder of that round. So the power of Tom Bombadil will take out the opponent's. In combat, you can use leaders to reroll dice. So depending on the strength of your leader, a normal leader will let you reroll 1 of the dice if it misses in combat, and hopefully you get something better than a 1, but hopefully you'll hit. And then if you have bigger leaders like Saruman or Boromir or Aragorn or Gandalf, they'll allow you to reroll multiple dice in combat, which will allow you to hopefully get better dice to be able to roll better. If you like being able to mitigate your luck in combat, which is a good idea for strategic reasons, make sure to have your leaders in the right points so you'll be able to help your dice go to the right faces so your hits actually hit your opponent and take out some of their units. So that's a few ways to mitigate luck in War of the Ring. This has been Roll with the Punches, and we'll see you next time.
Hi guys, it's Breacher18 and thank you for tuning in to my first segment for Throat Punch Lunch called Café Chat. So a bit of background about myself: I run Breacher18.com. I do videos related to board gaming, so whether that be reviews, previews, or just general writings about board games. I currently am working full-time at the Luderati Cafe in Nottingham, England, and I am their senior board game expert. But enough about that, let's talk about the segment. So basically, it's all surrounding Ameritrash games, and we will ask you, the gamers, various questions and see what you have to say, and then we will sum it up from there. So next time on Café Chat, we will be asking you if you think Ameritrash games are visually more appealing than Euro games, and whether this would actually influence you to play an Ameritrash game over a Euro game. But enjoy the rest of your Throat Punch Lunch, and I will see you again next time.
Punchies, I'm Forrest, and I'm here today for a new segment called 3 Reasons, where I take a look at a game outside of the top 1,000 games on Board Game Geek that I absolutely love and give you 3 reasons why you should go back and check out that game. First game we'll be checking out is Boomtown from Bruno Cathallo and Bruno Fedudi. This is for 3 to 5 players, even though I recommend it for 4 to 5 players. It'll take about 30 plus minutes to play. It's a very simple auctioning game in which you're going to be auctioning off different mines trying to have area control. But there's 3 reasons why this game rocks. The first reason is the actual auction itself, how it works. So the auction is going to have X amount of cards out on the board. X being the amount of players in the game. So each round you are guaranteed to get a card. However, you're bidding for the card that you want. Whoever wins the bid is going to get the first pick, and then it's going to go clockwise around the board. But the interesting aspect of this auction game is the fact the person who is counterclockwise, so the person who gets to pick the last card, is actually going to get half of the money that was bid. So that could be a huge chunk of change, in addition to also getting a card that might potentially be beneficial to you. This makes the auctions extremely tense, as though you may not want to lose the auction, but sometimes it's actually in your best interest to lose various different auctions depending on who is the winner. Now, you're going to be taking these mines that you're going to win in the auction, and you're going to be placing them in front of you. And this is where it becomes sort of a majority tug-of-war game, because the second cool reason that I love this game is the fact that you can become mayor of various different colors, and you'll earn these awesome little pawns right here. Now, why do you want to be the mayor of a color? Well, if you're the mayor of a color, you obviously are going to get points at the end of the game. However, from this point forward, until someone takes the mayorship from you, whenever someone takes that particular color of card during the auction phase, they have to pay you money based on how many cards of that color you have in front of you. It's a really ingenious mechanism, but you have to be careful because other people can take that mayor from you, and they certainly will try to do that. It's really cool, and it just bumps up the intensity of the auctions even more. The last reason why I really love this game, and in typical Ameritrash fashion, is because there are, delicious special ability cards that you will also be able to be bidding on. Now, these cards can have huge swings, potentially, with you stealing mines from other people, blowing up other people's mines, stealing money straight out from other people, going second when people don't expect it, and lots of other really cool things. So that is Boomtown from Bruno Cathallo and Bruno Fedudi. Still, one of my favorite go-to games, 4 and 5 players. I highly recommend checking it out. This has been 3 Reasons, and now back to more throat punchy goodness.
Hey everybody, I'm Kat Jackson. I'm bringing you the exciting segment of Throat Punch Lunch that we're calling the Hobby Hangout. I'm super excited to get to bring to you the art side of things. It happens to be a super passion of mine. One of the things that I do is I'm part of CK Studios. We're a professional paint studio where artists go out and teach. We train, we compete, we're award-winning. And I'm also the host of a neat little place online called the Hobby Hangout on Facebook, where about 1,200 of us hobbyists around the world get together and join in hangouts online and Google and get together and share our art and share our love of miniatures and our ideas and inspire each other. So that's kind of what I'd like to do for you here in the Hobby Hangout with Throat Punch Lunch. I'm going to be bringing a lot of information to you about some of the games that are involved in the miniature side. So, are you hanging on to your Arcadia Quest? Are you hanging on to Super Dungeon Explorer? Do you have Blood Rage yet? Are you looking at, some of the games that are out there that have these amazing miniatures in them? And have you ever thought about painting them? Do you know where to start? Some of the things we'll be talking about will be the minis. From the minis to the sprues, to the glues, to the tools we use. How do we get these things apart? How do we file them down? How do we put them together? Won't go into too much detail on all the hows, but we'll be talking a lot about the tools that you'll use. And then maybe I can share some information with you about where to go to get the information you need to fill in the gaps. So I want to share a lot of the hobby side with you because I think this is something that a lot of people are becoming more and more interested in. We're seeing this side of the industry grow. We're seeing people's passion for the art and everything that's going on behind me. And also, there's so much going on at conventions now. You can find a hobby area at almost every single one of them. why not go out there and check that out? I want to bring to you the information about where you can go to find those things. Also, what are some of the games that are out there? Myself, I started in this, I went down to my local game store, went down to pick up actually a board game to add to my 200 or so library that I have, and I happened to walk past this really neat display of miniatures, and it was for a game called Malifaux, which happens to be a tabletop skirmish game set in a steampunk land. Instantly fell in love with the models, so I had to get home, bought all the paints, did what I needed to do, put those together, and I fell in love with skirmish tabletop gaming. So I'm hoping I can kind of share some of that with you, inspire you maybe to go out and try something new. Also, let's take a look at some of those neat board games that are out there these days that have a lot of these neat models that you can kind of dig into and get into the art side. Looking forward to sharing our time with you on the Hobby Hangout segment, and as we say at CK Studios, come paint with us.
My name is Vernon. I'm originally from Illinois. I moved to South Florida in 2014. I'm a board gamer. I'm a father. I'm in the military, and I'm a tourist. I like long walks on the beach. Oh wait, that's a different video. Sorry. Basically, I got into playing board games around 2010, watching tabletop, starting to play those lighter games, Munchkin, Ticket to Ride, Settlers of Catan, Carcassonne, Mansions of Madness. I realize that's not one of those lighter ones, but we picked it up anyways, and I saw that the miniatures weren't painted in it. Well, about that time, one of my friends then was painting miniatures, so I asked him for a few tips, got some brushes, got some Citadel paints, and started painting. That lasted a couple months. I painted most of the Mansions of Madness figures, and then kind of fell off. After playing those games, I was looking for a little bit more conflict-oriented, and got into Tom's videos on HeroScape. Well, after breaking the bank and buying quite a bit of HeroScape, I sort of let that fall by the wayside as I picked up HeroClix. That was also a very competitive and strategic game. In 2013, I ended up moving to South Korea for work and was able only to take a few of my games with me. I started getting into more conflict-oriented games, however, and when I moved to South Florida, I didn't really know anybody. I didn't have a board game group, and most of my games ended up having dust on them. So from there, I found on Meetup, Tom was going to the Cool Stuff near my house and having a monthly meetup. So I decided to tag along. I purchased one of his favorite games, Kemet, and brought that along with me. After playing a few games, talking to the Dice Tower guys, I brought Kemet home and decided that I wasn't happy with the way the miniatures were. After unpacking quite a bit of my stuff, I found my paints again. I decided that I could paint Kemet and make it look very, well, let's just say it looked better than what it did out of the box. Well, since painting Mansions of Madness and Kemet, kind of painting Kemet, I got the bug again. I just finished my third set of Kemet. Tom owns my second set. I've painted Besieged, I painted Fireteam Zero, I painted Rum and Bones, I'm looking in the back there, I painted Arcadia Quest, Zombicide, I'm starting on Gears of War. Basically, any game that has miniatures, and they're unpainted, I'm going to paint them. I'm a board gamer who not only loves miniatures in his board games, but I also love some card games too. The one thing that does tie most of my games together is they all involve conflict. There's nothing better than staring across the table, watching the sweat pour down the brow of an opponent as you place that card. Ask anybody in my group. They'll say I'm aligned more with chaotic evil. No matter what the game is, they're always going to have to look out, because I'm coming for them in one way or another. Now, that's not to say that I don't enjoy co-op games. I do, as long as I get to beat things up or kill monsters or take the lead. So, if you're interested in conflict games and want to know some strategies about certain games that you're losing to your friends because you don't want to be that guy, I'm here to help. If you're also looking to paint some miniatures and trying to reach those hard-to-reach places, you'd be surprised how many of these miniatures coming out now can be pulled apart and even put back together. The first game I'm going to be talking about in my segments is going to be Fireteam Zero. Now, if you have other things that you want to know, if you have strategies that you're looking for in certain types of conflict games, go ahead and put them in the comments and I will read them and try to give you some strategy so you can crush your opponents. So stay tuned, keep watching, and prepare for conflict.
Hey everyone, this is Tim Jeanette the Metal Meeple, and this is the Miniature Breakdown. So for this first episode, I'd like to introduce myself, tell you a little bit about the segment. So my name's Tim Jeanette. I go by the Metal Meeple. It was a mishmash of my board gaming enthusiasm with my heavy metal band that I do so much of. So you can see where that came from. Anyway, basically I do video reviews on the Dice Tower, and I have a podcast called the Meeple Core Podcast. It's on iTunes if you want to check both of those things out. Anyway, I start off gaming with board games, just like your typical games that you hear about in the past, as far as like Splats and Fireball Island and stuff like that. And then quickly moved on to Dungeons and Dragons when I was an early teen. After that, I got into Magic the Gathering when the Ice Age set came out, and eventually I found my way into miniature games with Warhammer 40k, probably mid 90s or so. And I got into a lot of the different Games Workshop games such as Necromunda and Mordheim, and I also played a lot of Blood Bowl. And since then, up until about 2004, I got into War Machine primarily and kind of dropped the 40k stuff. Now I've played other miniature games around that time as well, and collectible ones like the Mage Knight, the original Mage Knight clicky game, the Mech Warrior click game, and also the World of Warcraft minis game. Some of the other miniature games that I've played is Malifaux and Anima Tactics and Alchemy. So past all of that, I got into board games in 2011, and I've pretty much been focusing on board games since then, but I still have War Machine as my close second. It is my favorite game, and that's when I want to start off with this series, is doing a couple episode series about War Machine, because the third installment of the game, War Machine and Hordes, comes out on June 29th of this month. So basically, I want to give you a little idea about the game and give you some tips and tricks that kind of apply to miniature games in general. I'm not going to touch really specific into the game, but I also want to give you some ideas on like the probability of dice rolls and things like that. And those can be applied to other games, and especially board games, as long as they're using the same amount of dice, etc. So, but if you're not familiar with War Machine, just a quick idea of the game. It is a skirmish level tactical miniatures game where you actually have to have a board. You play on a 4-foot by 4-foot board, and you measure out with rulers, similar to 40k and other games like that. And basically it's kind of like chess in a way. You have a warcaster who is your main part of your army, and you build a couple of mechs with him as well, and they're like 10 to 12 foot tall. They're crazy powerful and stuff. It's all steampunk related, and essentially you get some other guys and stuff, but the whole key of the game and the base scenarios is to eliminate your enemy's warcaster, and when you do that, you win the game. And so I find it deeply satisfying in strategy, because you're not necessarily trying to wipe out the opponent's stuff. You can come up with a lot of combos, a lot of things that'll help you achieve a goal of assassinating your opponent's caster, and it's just a whole lot of fun. And on the next episode, we're going to talk about kind of a brief overview of the rules, and I'm going to give you a rundown of how the game's played and everything, and then from there we'll just introduce some of the factions. So I hope you stay with me. I know it's a specific topic about one game, but it is just a short series on it, so I hope you stay with me and enjoy it. So till next time, keep on rocking and rolling dice.
Hi, Welcome to the first installment of Miniature World. So let me tell you a little bit about it, and if you don't know who I am, I'm Rob Warren, and it's a pleasure to be here on Throat Punch Lunch. First of all, I had to be a part of it, especially with my good buddy Sam. The minute I heard the name Throat Punch Lunch, I couldn't stop laughing because I thought it was the greatest name for a segment ever, and I knew I had to be a part of it. But the main thing is, what are we going to do here at Miniature World? Well, let me tell you, we're going to be looking at miniatures past, present, and future. We're going to be looking at miniature games. We're going to be looking at miniature companies, as well as showing off some games that are kind of under the radar, or nice little box sets of things and miniatures. We're going to show you how to make your own miniatures and how to do silicone and resin casting. We're going to hit everything we can and rate things and look at things and really dive right into the world of miniatures and give you a look that you don't get to see every single day. We're going to be looking at publishers that maybe you haven't heard of, or maybe heard of some games but don't know a lot about the other games that they do that are really unique and great. We're going to talk about games from the past, how miniature games came about, and everything that we possibly can learn about miniatures here on Miniature World. Now, next segment, we're going to be covering a really great company. Now, you may have heard of Halo Fleet Battles, okay? And it's by a company called Spartan Games, a fantastic company from England. But you may not know a lot about some of their other games, like Firestorm Armada or Dytopian Wars. And we're going to dive into some of those box sets next week, and I'm going to show you some of the miniatures painted and completely finished, and you guys are going to really get a look at some of the really great games that this company does, which I consider a very underrated company. So I hope you'll join me each and every segment for Miniature World. On to the next segment, and until next time, I'm Rob Warren, and we'll see you soon. Hope everybody has a great day.
So that was our first episode of Throat Punch Lunch. I certainly hope you enjoyed all of the different segments from their contributors, and I hope that you will come back next time when we're going to be having an episode called Moving Out. Now, Moving Out simply applies that I'm going to give free reign over to the segment contributors and let them do whatever they'd like to do as far as branching out into their own different areas, getting their own feel for their segments, and allowing them to kind of establish their segments the way that they would like to see it happen. So that's going to be in a couple of weeks. Come back for episode 2 of Moving Out. And thanks so much for joining us here on Throat Punch Lunch. See you on the flip side, folks.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.